Free beer, not a free beer, free beer. Unlimited, all night, as much as you could physically drink, poured into pitchers and set on your table and refilled the second they ran dry, and nobody ever came by with a check for it because there was no check for it. It was included. You paid for your steak and the beer was just there, and the wine was just there, and the sangria was just there, in big sweating pitchers, endless, for the price of an entree. And peel and eat shrimp piled in bowls you could go back to as many times as you wanted, and a salad bar the size of a small car, and a slogan delivered by an actor in a handlebar mustache and a straw boater hat that told you exactly what the deal was. I'll feed you like there's no tomorrow. That was Beefsteak Charlie's. And here is the problem with a business model built on the phrase, like there's no tomorrow. Eventually, tomorrow shows up. At its peak, this chain had more than 60 locations up and down the East Coast, packed every night. People lined up out the door for the shrimp and the sangria and the feeling, and this is the part that matters. The feeling of getting away with something, of beating the house, of walking out having consumed $40 of food and drink for 18. By 1987, the chain was effectively dead. That's about a decade. From one of the most beloved names in New York, dining to a corporate carcass being passed between owners who didn't want it. And the thing that killed it is the exact thing you just fell in love with 2 paragraphs ago. The free beer, the endless shrimp. The generosity was never generosity. It was a bet, and the bet came due. But I'm getting ahead of it. Because before there was a chain, there was a real Charlie. And the real Charlie is where this gets strange. Because the man whose name was on 60 restaurants had absolutely nothing to do with any of them. Go back to 1910, New York City. There was a restaurateur named Charles Chessar, and you'll see it spelled a few different ways because this is the kind of story where even the founder's name comes down to us slightly blurred. Chessar opened a restaurant, and around 1914 he moved it to 50th Street between Broadway and 8th Avenue, right in the beating heart of Manhattan, and there it stayed for 20 years. It was a sports place, horse racing, specifically. The walls were covered in racing photographs, framed pictures of horses and jockeys and finishes, and the crowd was sporting men, gamblers, newspapermen, the Broadway crowd. The specialty of the house was a steak sandwich, and it was good enough and the room was lively enough that the place became a genuine New York institution. The name came from a sports writer, a man named Howard Williams, a sports editor at the New York Morning Telegraph, hung the nickname Beefsteak Charlie on Chessar sometime around the early 1920s. And Chessar liked it, enough that he put it over the door. His place became Beefsteak Charlie's, named not by him, but by a newspaperman who thought it was funny. And already, in the original decades before the chain, there is free beer in this story. Because Beefsteak Charlie's in its early incarnations had a policy, free beer with every couple of dishes you ordered. And the place became a haven for jazz musicians. The owner and the bartenders had music in their backgrounds, and the musicians came, and it turned into something between a restaurant and a club and a booking office, and some nights practically a hotel. A place that ran till 4 in the morning, full of players, where if you were a jazz man in New York, you knew you could go and be among your own and drink for cheap and maybe find work. So the free beer generosity, the keep you here all night warmth, that was real, and it was authentic, and it belonged to a specific place and a specific scene in early 20th century Manhattan. A fire tore through in 1933 and destroyed most of the racing pictures. Chessar left the business around 1934. The restaurant passed to a man named William Soshnick, who ran it for decades as a private operation with no interest whatsoever in expanding. It was one restaurant. It was a New York thing. And for 40-odd years, that's all it was. A beloved, singular, slightly faded institution with a great name and a steak sandwich. Nobody ever trademarked the name. Hold on to that, because it's the hinge the entire modern story swings on. For 70 years, Beefsteak Charlie's was one of the most recognized restaurant names in New York, and legally, it belonged to no one. Nobody had filed the paperwork. The name was just sitting there, famous and unclaimed like a wallet on a park bench. Now, 1975. Enter the man who actually built the chain, and who did not, to be clear, own or have anything to do with the original. Larry Ellman. Ellman was a restaurateur, and he ran a chain called Steak and Brew. Steak and Brew was part of an old, storied New York restaurant organization called Longshops, and the concept was already halfway to the thing Beefsteak Charlie's would become. Steak and Brew, the beer built right into the name. Unlimited salad, beer with your meal, an affordable night out. And in the fall of 1975, Steak and Brew filed for Chapter 11 reorganization. It went bankrupt. The concept, whatever its charms, wasn't working as a business. And here's where Larry Ellman does the thing that is either genius or the original sin of this entire story, depending on how you look at it. And I go back and forth. He's sitting on a failing chain called Steak and Brew, and he realizes, or somebody around him realizes, that the name Beefsteak Charlie's, this beloved 70-year-old New York institution, had never been trademarked by anybody. It was free, famous, warm, nostalgic, loaded with decades of goodwill, and legally available to the first person who filed a form. So he filed the form. In March of 1976, Beefsteak Charlie's Incorporated, formerly Steak and Brew Incorporated, filed a trademark on the name, and Ellman started converting his Steak and Brew locations into Beefsteak Charlie's. There was no purchase of the original, no connection to Chesser, no connection to Soshnik, no line of succession, nothing. A bankrupt steak chain put on the clothing of a beloved dead institution because the clothing had been left unguarded. The chain that America would come to remember as Beefsteak Charlie's shares nothing with the original Beefsteak Charlie's except a name that a sports writer invented as a joke in 1922. I want to be fair to Ellman because he stole a name, is the cheap version. What he actually did was recognize that the name carried something his own product couldn't manufacture. Instant, decades-deep familiarity. A brand new chain has to spend years and fortunes teaching people to feel warm about it. Ellman skipped the line. He bought 70 years of accumulated affection for the price of a trademark filing. As a piece of pure marketing insight, it's genuinely brilliant. It's also the first sign of what this company really was, underneath the shrimp. Because from its very first day, the modern Beefsteak Charlie's was a business that understood the appearance of something. Warmth, generosity, tradition, abundance could be acquired and deployed strategically, whether or not the substance was actually there. It borrowed the feeling of an old institution, and soon it would sell the feeling of unlimited abundance. Both were, in a sense, the same trick. And God, did the trick work? Because whatever the origins, the thing Ellman built landed on the American public at exactly the right moment and gave them exactly what they wanted. The restaurants took off immediately, and the concept was pure, uncut indulgence, engineered to make you feel like you were being spoiled rotten. Here was the deal. You came in, you ordered an entree, the steak sandwich, a cut of beef, whatever, and for that flat price, a whole world opened up. The salad bar, which was enormous, and which in that era was itself a draw. But the salad bar had the shrimp, big bowls of pre-peeled, ready-to-eat shrimp, unlimited. And for a middle-class family in the late 1970s, unlimited shrimp was luxury. Shrimp was special occasion food, expensive food, and here it was in a bottomless bowl, and you could take as much as you wanted and go back and take more. People built entire meals out of just returning to the shrimp again and again. There were special nights, all-you-can-eat shrimp promotions, that turned the whole thing into an event. And the drinks. This is what people remember most, the older crowd especially. Unlimited beer, wine, or sangria. Not a drink ticket, not a happy hour, not one included glass. Pitchers, big pitchers of sangria sweating on the table, refilled as fast as you drank them, all night. Included in the price. Teenagers getting taken to dinner by an older sibling had their first ever drink at a Beefsteak Charlie's and had way too much of it, because how do you not, when it's just sitting there in a pitcher and nobody's counting? The advertising sold the fantasy directly. An actor dressed as Beefsteak Charlie, the straw boater, the mustache, The early 1900s getup, cosplaying a man he'd never met from a restaurant he had no connection to, beaming out of your television set, later joined by a nephew character, Beefsteak Chuck. And the slogans were shameless in the best way. "I'll feed you like there's no tomorrow. You're gonna get spoiled." And they meant it. That was the genius of the customer experience. It didn't feel like a restaurant trying to make money off you. It felt like a restaurant trying to lose money on you. It felt like your uncle throwing a party. Everything about the place was engineered to make you feel like you, personally, were beating the system, walking out having eaten and drunk 2 or 3 times what you paid for. By 1984, the chain had grown to more than 60 locations, concentrated on the East Coast, but reaching out to places like Buffalo, and the affection people had for it was real and specific. Read the memories people leave online decades later, and they don't talk about the food being the best they ever had. They talk about the atmosphere, about how everyone in the room felt like a friend for the evening, about the background music, the whole vibe of abundance and welcome. One person remembers a waiter telling him the restaurant's background playlist was so beloved that people asked how to find it. This was a place people loved. So how does a place people love, packed every night, giving them unlimited shrimp and endless sangria, die in about a decade? It dies because of the unlimited shrimp and the endless sangria. That's not irony. That's arithmetic. Let me explain the trap, because it's a beautiful and terrible piece of business, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. An all-you-can-eat model works on averages. The restaurant is making a bet that the average customer, across thousands of customers, will consume less than the flat price covers. Some people eat a little, some eat a lot, and as long as the average stays under the line, the house wins. Casinos run on the same math. So does insurance. You are not pricing the individual. You are pricing the crowd. And that math is fragile in a way that a normal menu's math is not. On a regular menu, every single item has a known cost and a known price and a locked-in margin. You sell a steak, you make X. There's no exposure. The all-you-can-eat model deliberately throws away that certainty in exchange for a marketing weapon, the irresistible feeling of unlimited, and it holds together only as long as 3 things stay stable: the cost of the food, the behavior of the customers, and the discipline of the operator. Beefsteak Charlie's built its entire identity on the 2 most volatile inputs a restaurant can possibly choose: shrimp and alcohol. Shrimp is a commodity with a wildly swinging market price. It is subject to weather, to fishing yields, to fuel costs, to import markets, to disease in shrimp farms halfway around the world. When you make unlimited shrimp a pillar of your brand, you have handed control of your food costs to forces on the other side of the planet that you cannot see, predict, or influence. In a good year, the bet pays. In a bad year, every bowl you refill is bleeding you, and you cannot stop refilling it because unlimited is the promise on the sign and the whole reason people came. And alcohol. Unlimited alcohol is the other pillar, and it's arguably worse because the exposure isn't only financial. Think about who an unlimited drinks promotion attracts and what it encourages. It rewards exactly the customer you least want, the one who comes specifically to outdrink the price. And it does so in an era, the late 70s into the 80s, when America's entire relationship with drinking and driving was about to change permanently. Because it did change. In 1980, a woman named Candy Lightner founded Mothers Against Drunk Driving after her daughter was killed by a drunk driver, and May Didi detonated across American culture. Through the early and mid-80s, drunk driving went from a punchline to a serious crime. Laws tightened. The drinking age was pushed to 21 nationwide. Liability shifted. Restaurants and bars began to be held legally responsible for what happened when a customer they'd overserved got behind the wheel. Dram shop laws, they're called, and they turned the free-flowing pitcher business model from a marketing triumph into a lawsuit waiting to happen. Sit with the position Beefsteak Charlie's was suddenly in. Their single most famous feature, the thing on the billboards, the thing people loved them for, unlimited beer, wine, and sangria, became, over the span of just a few years, a legal and moral liability. A restaurant whose brand was, "We will pour you as much alcohol as you can drink for one flat price," was operating in a country that had abruptly and correctly decided that pouring people unlimited alcohol was dangerous. You can't be the endless sangria restaurant in the age of MADD. The core of your identity is now the thing the culture is organizing against. This is the part that never sat right with me, and I'll put it here, in the middle of the collapse, because this is where it lives. Everyone tells this story as a business failure. Bad margins, commodity exposure, overexpansion, the usual autopsy. And all of that is true. But underneath the spreadsheet, there's something sadder and more human, which is that Beefsteak Charlie sold a fantasy of a world without consequences. And it sold it right at the exact moment America was growing up and deciding that consequences were real. Feed you like there's no tomorrow is a wonderful promise and a monstrous way to run anything. And the country that fell in love with that promise in 1977 was, by 1985, a country installing designated driver programs and counting people's drinks. The chain didn't just lose a pricing battle, it got left behind by a culture that stopped wanting what it was selling. It was a party, and the party ended, and parties always end, and some part of Larry Ellman's whole enterprise had bet that this one wouldn't. Now layer the ordinary business problems back on top of that because they were happening at the same time. The expansion itself strained the model. 60-plus locations is a lot of shrimp bars to keep stocked, a lot of kitchens to keep consistent, a lot of pitchers to keep filled. The all-you-can-eat concept that felt so magical when it was a few beloved New York spots became a much harder thing to control across dozens of restaurants spread up and down the coast. Consistency slipped. Costs climbed. The magic of the early years, that feeling that everyone in the room was a friend for the evening, is very hard to franchise and scale, and much easier to lose. And competition had figured out the abundance game too. The salad bar, once a novelty, was everywhere by the mid-'80s. Every chain had one. The specialness leaked out of it. What had made Beefsteak Charlie's feel like a steal in 1977 felt increasingly ordinary in 1985, while the costs of actually delivering it kept rising. The margins, squeezed from every direction at once, shrimp prices, liability, competition, the expense of unlimited drinks in a tightening legal climate, simply stopped working. And then the company did the thing that dying restaurant chains always do, the thing that's less a strategy than a symptom. It started getting passed around. Beefsteak Charlie's Incorporated gave way around 1985 to new ownership under a company called Lifestyle Restaurants Incorporated. And then in 1987, it changed hands again to Bombay Palace Restaurants. Watch the pattern, because you've seen it in every one of these stories. Once a chain stops making sense as a business, it stops being a restaurant and becomes an asset, a thing that gets bought and sold by people who see a distressed property and a recognizable name and think they can extract some value from it. Each new owner is further from the original spark. Each one understands the brand a little less and the balance sheet a little more. Lifestyle Restaurants and Bombay Palace did not buy Beefsteak Charlie's because they loved the shrimp bar. They bought it because it was for sale and cheap, which is a different thing, and everyone in the dining room can eventually feel the difference even if they can't name it. By 1987, the year Bombay Palace took it on, the chain as a real, thriving, coherent entity was finished. That's the death date on the corporate tombstone. From that peak of 60-plus roaring locations in 1984 to functionally dead in 1987, 3 years. And then the long, quiet afterlife, which is its own kind of sad. Individual locations lingered. A restaurant is a physical thing, a building, a lease, a staff, a local following. And those don't vanish the day the parent company gives up. Some Beefsteak Charlie's kept their doors open into the early 2000s, running on inertia and neighborhood loyalty, disconnected from any real corporate structure, the trademarks lapsing, the brand legally dissolving around them. As of March 2003, there was one advertised as open in Elmsford, New York, though by then it was genuinely unclear whether it had any real connection to the old chain. because the original trademarks had expired and someone had filed a fresh registration in 2001. The name, once again, had come loose from its moorings. Just as Ellman had grabbed an unguarded name in 1976, now the name he'd built was itself floating free, available for anyone to pick up. There was an independently operated Beefsteak Charlie's that hung on until around 2009, and that same year someone opened a brand new Beefsteak Charlie's in a mall on Long Island, a fresh attempt to reanimate the name one more time, to see if the old magic still had a pulse. Think about how strange that lineage is. A name coined by a sports writer in 1922 for a restaurant that a man named Chesser built and left in the 30s, that Sochnik ran privately for decades, that Larry Ellman grabbed off the ground in 1976 and stapled onto a bankrupt steak chain, that grew into 60 roaring temples of unlimited sangria, that collapsed under the weight of its own promise by 1987, that got passed between two more owners, that flickered out location by location into the 2000s, and that keeps getting picked back up by people who remember the feeling and think maybe they can bottle it again. Nobody was ever really guarding that name. That's almost the whole story. It was always just sitting there, carrying its decades of accumulated warmth, and people kept grabbing it, and the warmth kept turning out to be real but not enough. Because here's what I keep coming back to, the thing at the bottom of all of it. The generosity was the product, not the steak, not even really the shrimp, the feeling of being given more than you paid for. That was what Beefsteak Charlie's actually sold, and it sold it better than almost anyone. Walking out of there stuffed and a little drunk and convinced you'd gotten away with something was a genuinely wonderful feeling, and for about a decade, a lot of Americans got to have it. But you cannot build a lasting business on making people feel like they beat you. Every single night, thousands of customers walked out having consumed more than they paid for, feeling triumphant. And every one of those triumphs was a small loss on someone's books. The customer winning and the restaurant winning were the same transaction viewed from two sides, and they could not both keep winning forever. The math only worked as long as the shrimp was cheap, and the sangria was legal to pour without limit, and the culture still wanted a party with no last call. The moment any one of those things moved, the whole warm, generous, beloved machine started running in reverse. And in the 80s, all three moved at once. I'll feed you like there's no tomorrow. They should have listened to their own commercial, because there's always a tomorrow. It's the one thing you can't put in a pitcher and give away for free. It just keeps coming, whether the shrimp is cheap or not, whether the party's still fun or not, and eventually it walks in the door and it sits down and it asks for the check. The check on that fantasy came due around 1987, and there was no free pitcher big enough to cover it.